Hi everyone and welcome to the Newsagent podcast. I'm Susie Lysett, Goodlord Senior Content Executive, and today I'm joined by Prime Living's Director, Hassan. He's going to help me talk through the topic of how to get property management right. So we'll be sharing some top tips and some of the top things that landlords could perhaps be looking out for when looking for a property manager. But to kick us off, Abs, for the listeners out there that don't know who you are, perhaps if you could just tell us a bit about your background and a bit about Prime Living as well.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Hassan. We started Prime Living maybe about 8 years ago or so. It's myself and my twin brother. My brother is a pharmacist by trade, and myself, I used to work in advertising, digital advertising. We've always had a passion for property and always wanted to get into it. I first kind of made the plunge, as it were, and started doing property management in London. Yeah, and then my brother joined in afterwards. We've been growing it ever since. We really kind of, when we first started, we just really saw that we're looking at other kind of adverts, how people were advertising, and we just thought that we could just do it a bit better, to be honest, at that stage. The market was very good at that 8 years ago or so, but we just felt we could just do it that little bit better. And I think our landlords and stuff, we quickly grew from there, and I think that they could really see that what we were doing. Yeah, and we've just had a quite nice time overall over all these years, just building up, and time just flies so quick as well. So like 8 or 9 years later, I need to kind of see this time just flies really. So but it's been great, yeah. Yes.
It's great to hear that you've enjoyed it then, as you say, if time's flown in that way. And it's from quite diverse backgrounds, although I suppose that digital marketing, it does fit in with the fact that you spotted that perhaps the advertising and that side of things could be done better. I guess if you've got that background, it would make sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think also one of the things is we just saw, like, particularly we started in HMOs, house shares, and we saw that just a lot of landlords and agents were just chucking anyone into a house and just hoping for the best. But we really took time to just to tailor like personalities and like kind of ages, type of tenants. And we just found that tenants really loved that, and they just ended up staying for years. And that's how we first started in kind of HMOs and stuff. And then house of multiple occupancies. And then we went on to do more flats and normal single lets after that. It was interesting to dive into property, but yeah, haven't looked back since.
Yeah, no, well, I'd say that especially in HMOs, like you say, keeping tenants for a number of years, that is quite impressive. So we'll delve into that kind of thing throughout this conversation, sure. I think, because obviously you're doing something right, managing the property well if you're keeping tenants in for that period of time. But obviously, so today's topic, property management, it is quite a broad topic. There are quite a few elements in that. So we may not be able to talk about everything to do with that, but we'll see how much ground we can cover. Let's kind of start at the beginning, when landlords are looking for a property manager, really.
Sure.
What would you say are the top criteria, kind of in your experience, that landlords would tend to focus on when deciding on the right property manager for them?
I guess obviously locality is somewhat important. It's kind of becoming kind of less important given everything's kind of going online, but of course locality and I guess reputation is always number one, understandably. And I guess there's kind of three ways we look at how can we increase our reputation or demonstrate our reputation. One is kind of like by ourselves, like releasing content, being out there, maybe whether it be through our like blog posts or social media. It's kind of demonstrating from ourselves, how can we deliver a great product, good service to our clients. So that's the kind of the first one. And then secondly, I think credibility wise, so it's like kind of like third party somewhat approval or reputation on the market. So whether you have your qualifications, you've got you're ALA qualified, or you use the right deposit protection scheme, the right client money protected. And then afterwards, if you've been featured any sort of newspapers, any articles, basically anywhere that we always recommend for just other agents, stuff that we know that they want to build their kind of presence online in terms of their reputation to help get new business, is to just whatever you can is get your name out there where other people kind of feature it, or other brands and stuff. So maybe you can put like logos on your footer of your website where you are accredited, etc. You are featured on this newspaper, or all those kind of credibility points, and that overall boosts your kind of reputation to whenever a landlord is looking for a new managing agent. So so I think your self kind of validation is getting out there, putting your own content out there. Third party validation, where you you use other people's kind of credibility and stuff to really boost your presence in the market. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is your like client validation. So that's like doing reviews, client reviews, testimonials, case studies. If you can get some case studies particularly on your website, of how you turned around a property or how you helped a landlord in a particular scenario, then you kind of win on all accounts. You show that you're giving great content. You are a market leader. You've got the right reputation. And then also the clients even refer to you, and they're like in your corner, kind of championing you on as well. So when you're hitting all those 3 points, we find that is a good way to overall create your presence in the market and puts you as a kind of a leader in terms of your industry as well.
No, that seems like a good 3 top things to focus on as an agency. When you talk about kind of the newspaper side, articles and things like that, what kind of things do you look to share? Because that may be something that some agencies haven't considered, blogs and things. Sure. I think that probably agencies started to do that more a bit during lockdown, for example, and things like that as well, even if they didn't before. But what would you advise in terms of getting into newspapers and that press coverage?
Yeah, sure. I guess because we're actually in the process of doing this at the moment, like another stage of going through it at the moment. And I guess the number one is thinking about, okay, which ones are recognizable for landlords? Because you can get, obviously put yourself out onto various podcasts or property people's blogs and stuff, but they may not, if they're not recognized and stuff, it doesn't give you that much credibility. So I guess you have to first write maybe some interesting articles of your thoughts on particular areas of the market, and reach out to newspapers, press departments and stuff, and see if they have someone in the kind of property field who is looking for new content. And just keep chipping away. You will find someone who is, maybe they're a bit short on articles that month or so, or really particularly fancies what your thoughts are. And then, just as long as they feature an article, or even just feature comments, that you have made, then that allows you to, use that as a bit of a credibility stamp for your own profile. And also like magazines, like property magazines, because they're read by landlords. That's a really good way, and they always love case studies as well. So that YPN is one of them, your property network magazine. And as long as you've got good bit of content to share, they'll be happy to hear about it. So I think look out for those magazines, property magazines, and property areas of newspapers, and just try where you can to see if you can find ones which are recognizable to other landlords, because that will help to boost your credibility in the market.
No, that makes complete sense. And especially as you say case studies, because I guess that the landlord can put themselves into that situation and see whether that's something that a challenge that they may have come up against in the past, and then they can really grasp how it is that you could help in that given situation. So it makes complete sense to try and put that information out there for them to see in the right places. I noticed as well that on your website, you also have some statistics on there where you talk about obviously your performance, your agency's performance. I think it was 99% of tenants paying rent on time, 96% occupancy rate. How important are stats like that to your landlords, do you find? Is that something that they really take on board and it helps aid their decision, or is it, sort of just something that you think that agencies should put out there naturally and it's just part of the process?
Yeah, I think it's important, especially obviously the first one being rent paid, on time, in full and on time. I think maybe that just shows how you do fight the corner for your landlords in terms of chasing those tenants who are, hopefully they've just had a bank's, a standing order error. But if not, then you're chasing them for the rent payments and stuff. But no, I think it's a good way you can to give stats. It just helps to make it a bit more real, rather than just saying, oh yeah, we're very good at chasing them, etc. If you have a stat to back it up, then that just gives you the extra bits of credibility, I guess, or best fact-based, truth, as it were.
No, exactly. It's always nice when you've got that proof that you can say, that this is how effective we are in this situation. I mean, with such a high percentage, do you have any tips in terms of how agents can potentially put to good use to make sure that they can achieve similar levels of rent payments on time?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I guess we're quite fortunate where we work with predominantly the professional market, so they are generally very good payers of rent. So I know if you go into the kind of maybe like the LHA market or even like company lets and stuff, sometimes it may not be as consistent. So yeah, I think we're very much helped by a very London professional market, where most of our tenants are like in their late 20s, 30s. They're probably looking for a mortgage in the future and stuff. They're just generally like really good payers of rent. But I guess also having a good rent follow-up procedure, just if rent doesn't come in, you've got a set procedure that gets actioned rather than having to figure out on the fly. It's just something you have to have a system for in the background.
I think a system in every situation is always a good thing to keep things on track. How important would you say that referencing is then in terms of, I suspect that you may be quite lucky in as much as your audience, they do tend to be these professionals that pay on time, but how important is referencing to make sure that you get the right tenant in the first place? And then how would you say that you go about ensuring that you do get those right tenants for your landlords?
Referencing very important. We reference everyone. And we do. First of all, we actually use, of course, Good Lord's platform, which has been really a game changer for us. And it just provides great, easy checks in terms of their ID, credit, income, and residential checks. And I think you just have to really review the data that you see there as well. Like we always look at the data that the tenant has sent in and just see if there's anything alarming, etc. in there. Now, referencing is very important, and I don't think, I wouldn't advise any agent to skip it or otherwise just be light on it, because you get one error and that could really just really damage the landlord in future. So you hear about these stories and stuff around the market. But you think you have to be very strict upon it. Even if it does take longer, even if it does push out the start date or the tenant gets a bit wobbly and stuff, you just have to say no. You have to complete the referencing. Let's do all the right checks. You got to make sure that obviously your landlord is protected, and that's what referencing is all about. But also, I mean, partly before even they hit referencing, you have to meet we say we always have to meet the tenant, at least video call for us, and just see if you think personally wise they are a good fit for the property or for the landlord, and that they are going to, they seem like a credible character to you. We're happily turn away tenants if we just think, you know what, this person looks just not great. If the feeling comes across, because all the agents, I'm sure, or landlords listening to this will have done maybe tens or hundreds of viewings, or thousands maybe of viewings, and with that sort of experience, you'll be able to gauge who is a good candidate, who is a bit just a bit someone you maybe not want to let to. So just keep the options open. And just you trust your gut firstly before even going to referencing, because usually your gut is right, we find.
Are you finding that the cost of living is having to change your processes in any way, or perhaps change how you're advising landlords or anything along those lines, or perhaps more guarantors, things like that? Is there any trend that you're seeing there?
Not particularly. I think we still use the same process of doing our kind of personality checks initially when we meet them, then afterwards all the referencing checks. I mean, if we need a guarantor, then that just come up during referencing or even before referencing. I mean, we do advise kind of extra rent protection insurance where we can, just because, especially if we're doing like a whole property. I think it's just a bit of a no-brainer, really. To really protect yourself for 12 months for a minimal amount. We always kind of advise landlords to do rent protection, especially if it's like the first tenancy. Then afterwards, you might decide, okay, you know what, I don't need it after that point. Their jobs are still secure, etc. But I think it's always best to be on the proactive and the protective sort of side of things at the start, and then you can go from there otherwise.
No, completely. And obviously you touched on it before, sort of the advertising side of things. What do you put into the process that makes you stand out in terms of actually advertising your landlord's properties now? You know, what is it that you can offer them to make them see that you kind of go over and above in this category?
So I guess initially you have to first, before even taking on the property, just have to make sure the property is going to hit the mark with the audience. So, you know, if you do your initial viewing, you're about to instruct a landlord, and some agents would just chuck the kind of the advert online and just, you know, they could let it fine, but you know, you could say, advise the landlord, okay, actually let's paint it, let's decorate this. You need to really change this old-fashioned bathroom or whatever it is. Get rid of old furniture. You know, really have a really clean base of, you know, your aesthetics of the property. And then once you've got kind of the framework of the property right, then you're like, okay, then would it benefit the landlords, you know, in terms of having the property, adding furniture to it, or having the property dressed, because we do property dressing for our landlords who wish to have it. And that really is we find it quite a bit of a game changer, because a tenant coming into a room or a property can really feel, you know, you're selling the kind of lifestyle to them, not just the property. And that's what like property dressing really helps to do. It sells them a bit of a lifestyle and helps them to imagine, you know, them living there. So we find dressing really helps, particularly for our HMOs, our roomlets. So yeah, I'm surprised that I don't really know any other agents who really do it that much, because it's quite quick, relatively quick to do, and you can charge extra for it. So we find that it's really quite a bit of a game changer. So property dressing and then advertising it, obviously getting great photos and doing, you know, videos, be it 360 tours. Again, you can teach your teams and stuff how to do 360 tours. You don't have to buy a really expensive camera for it. You can do it yourselves. It can be done easily yourself. And then that allows you to even open it to a larger pool of tenants who are viewing from abroad, because abroad, especially international student stuff, they even are willing to pay higher rents and stuff because they find it challenging to get units sometimes. So 360 tours, videos for sure. So if you just have to step up from just doing the photos, which is the kind of standard, it's okay, what about the property aesthetics? And then above that, okay, what about accessibility to the aesthetics? Then you think about the video, the 360 tour, you know, whether you're going to do video calls when you're there over Skype, you know, Google Meet, WhatsApp, whatever it takes kind of thing. And then that really just opens up a pool, a larger pool to you, to get the best tenant that you want for the property, for the landlord.
I guess it gives the tenant the opportunity to kind of filter a little bit themselves, because you're right that seeing just photos is one thing, and however good they are, though, you can't really link up the rooms and walk through them quite the same way. So that makes complete sense. I guess continuing on the topic of improvements, obviously one of the big aspects of being a landlord is keeping on top of compliance and legislation changes and things like that, and obviously ensuring that all of the equipment and things, gas safety and etc., everything's up to scratch. And within that, obviously, you have energy efficiency, and the fact that at the moment that's quite a big topic, and although we don't know dates and so on, but there's likely to be an increase in the minimum energy efficiency standards and so on. How do you advise landlords around that? Do you go in and help advise them on the improvements they can make? Are you encouraging that now, or advising them on how they can spread the costs? How involved are you on that aspect?
I guess we always do like an initial assessment of the property, whether also being part of their certificates and stuff, but also even, you know, looking at, you know, is the fuse box, you can tell by the fuse box is really outdated. Even like windows and stuff, you know, yes, double glazing or triple glazing if you're on a very busy road, will also help your EPC. But also you have to think, okay, well, if you're going to do a refurb anyway, adding the extra whatever £1,000, is it going to add a lot of value to your product overall? And it's something you don't have to worry about for the next, 10 years or whatever it's going to be. We do like a bit of an assessment for whenever we kind of view a property, see how can the landlord just improve it in terms of rental income, of course, but also there's some things, they maybe just let's just tackle now while it's going to be empty over a transition between tenants. Because just if you can, don't do any, try not to do works during when tenants are there. Later on, especially if the EPC kind of kicks in, then you might have to find yourself doing a lot of work. So if you can, we're very proactive with just advising where we can to landlords to just take action now, and then you can kind of rest easy later on.
It makes sense to ensure that you're looking at that when tenants aren't there, like you say, but I guess so it's not just a question of making sure that landlords make the improvements, it's making sure it's at the best time for them and their tenants, so that then they can continue to get their rent throughout the year without any complaints, I suppose, if it's disrupting tenants. Do you have any other tips in terms of helping landlords to maximise their rental returns? I guess when you're a property manager, that's one of the areas that landlords will be quite interested in.
Sure.
How can you go about doing that in the best way?
I think apart from what I mentioned before about the advertising and having the different content types, because you want to have different content types to suit the different type of tenants who want a video viewing, who want to be in person showing around, etc., or want a 360 tour so they can really get an idea of the space there. But I think apart from that, initially what we're always trying to do is when adverts are put up online, the first spike you get, because it's the highest ranking on the portals, that first viewing slot is the most important one, or the first couple of viewing slots is the most important. So we always try and put really big time slot in for viewings, and try and batch in as many as we can in terms of viewings, like back to back. This is just so obviously we can get, for us it's obviously efficient, but it helps because then the tenants viewing can see that as they're going out, someone else is going in. It does create a bit more urgency for tenants who are kind of, they're maybe lightly looking, or they're deciding between two places. We find that helps in terms of conversion rate, is having a lot of people come at one time. You get multiple offers, and that just giving your landlord say like 4 offers for the property from one set of viewings, etc., or whatever it will be. It really just puts they're really chuffed, and they can really select the best person rather than having to go for one option. They can actually think, okay, you know what, I have all these options, this one really hits the mark for me. So I think bulk viewings, especially for the first viewing slot, it's always the most important. So we always try and do we launch the adverts, and about 3 days afterwards we have a 2 to 3 hour viewing slot roughly, and just because you need some time to actually tee up the viewings, and that really gives us we find the best kind of ROI in terms of our time initially. So I think that helps, because you can get, when you have tenants all competing for the same property, that helps you do a bidding war. So you can say to tenant, okay, yes, we have multiple offers, please get back to us by this time with what is your maximum offer, or you can kind of just play it that way. So that helps get the landlord's best rental income. I think also one of the other key ones is we find even for our own portfolio, some landlords have tenancies that they renew in like November, December, February, the kind of cold months, as it were, which we really don't. We don't like even going out to obviously the office and going into the cold to do viewings. But other than that, it's just a case of not as many people are looking during those periods. So we always advise landlords to align their tenancies to around about August, September, where you're on the peak of the market. Or otherwise, you do get some other spikes here and there in the annual calendar. But August and September is very consistent, because you have all the grad jobs starting. This is for the professional market. And also you have all the students as well, if you are targeting students, particularly like international students, if you're zone 1 or zone 2-ish. So yeah, if you align it to the peak of the market, you can get the best rents at that time. So some landlords like, oh no, I want 12 months, even though the tenancy starts in the beginning of December. Like, no, don't do that. You should just, give a short period, let it align, give it a 9-month or whatever it is to align it to August. And next year, then you can run 12 months back-to-back tenancies, year on year at the peak of the market. So we always find it odd that some landlords really want a 12-month at November or something like that. We just try and advise them not to do that. I think that's quite a big one. Don't let in the cold months if you can avoid it.
I guess as well, though, that if you're ensuring that they're always being able to let it out at those peak times, and you overlap it with the fact that you do you create that sense of urgency, then it just means that you're cutting down on that void period too. So it's just money saving in all aspects, really.
Definitely. The last thing you want is to go when it goes. We kind of, from the 20th of December onwards, we call it like no man's land, because there's not much point doing viewings, because everyone's just focused on Christmas. So just try and stay to August, September. Especially August, you'll be all right.
Exactly. I think that before we perhaps look a little bit around kind of maintenance, and I know that you've got a particular case study which I think will be of interest, just to show how you can really go above and beyond in property management. I think let's just take a quick break first.
Tenants are the landlords of the future. That's a pretty well-known industry mantra. So why not make sure they're happy with your agency by giving them the best rental experience in the world? Goodlord streamlines the entire rental process for your tenants, from signing the offer letter to collecting their rent. And it offers them deals and extra services to help them get move-in ready, all in one online journey. Head to goodlord.co today to learn more. Goodlord. It's just that good.
So I guess now, as I said, let's have a look at the maintenance side. I know that we have touched on kind of improvements. We've touched on some of the safety aspects and things like that. In terms of actually managing the properties for sort of everyday maintenance and things that may crop up with tenants, how do you advise managing that in the best way for the landlord? Or is it depending on each individual landlord's preferences for how much they want to be contacted about these things?
Actually, some landlords, yes, we are left to our own devices, which we quite like. But in most scenarios, well, we have like generally a cap of how much we're allowed to spend per property issue. So obviously, a landlord doesn't want to know when you're going there to change. What will be kind of an easy one, like a toilet seat. Landlord doesn't want to know. They just want it done, and for you not to bother them during their working day. So yeah, we always recommend if it's for other agents to have like a maintenance cap where you don't have to. They're happy for you to just keep your maintenance tickets, your maintenance, resolving going without having to bother them. And then when it goes up above a certain amount, then we contact the landlord, see if they're happy. We give them the kind of full brief, a quote if needed, and see what they want to do from there. That's how we generally run it. So we have some landlords who are just, they said that regardless, they don't want to be contacted anyway. Some of our international landlords, they just trust us fully, kind of thing. We've been working with them for years, so we do that for them, of course. But most of them, we just go by the cap, and that helps kind of get clarity on what to expect, or to help not get unexpected costs coming through on their statement each month.
And for international landlords, as you just mentioned, obviously, I know that you work with some of those. What are kind of the differences in terms of how you go about managing that? Is it easier? Is it more difficult with landlords that are perhaps in the local area? How do you manage that?
I guess it's well, I guess when you have to. The only thing is when you have to explain issues, you have to be a bit more thoughtful that they may not have visited the property for years, so they don't recall all the elements of it. Like, if we've had like problems like heating or plumbing issues, they might not remember, like, how is the plumbing, the pipes go which way, etc., and stuff that might be very intricate for them. So you just have to think about, okay, how can I show this visually to them? Whether it be, like a video call in person, explaining the issue. We always try and get for our international landlords, if we can, videos showing them the issue. That just really helps them kind of remember and recall where everything is located. Yeah, video recording or video in person, or even sometimes might do like a diagram or so, like particularly if we're doing installation of a new fire detection system. Like if you've got HMOs, like they're going through additional licensing or mandatory licensing that you need, depending on the size of the property, you need a new fire detection system. We find a diagram really helps, rather than just saying one here, one there, one on this floor. We just make a little floor plan thing for them. Just think about visually, will they understand it very well? And just try and help them out and think, that they haven't been there for years, maybe. How can we make it clearer for them?
And actually looking at these differences, what about where you have perhaps a landlord that only has a couple of properties, for example, versus a portfolio landlord? I mean, do you find, I would assume that there are differences in terms of how you'd go about managing those properties for them. I mean, do you find it, again, easier having conversations with, say, the portfolio landlords because they have a bit more experience? How does that all work for you?
Yeah, I guess we find the portfolio landlords a bit more easier, because if they're a portfolio landlord, they've probably been doing this for a very long time. So they're very used to getting costs, and they kind of know, like, okay, if there's a roof issue, like, oh, they'll say like, oh, is it the lead that is come away or whatever it is, and be like, yes, it is. So you have to explain less generally to portfolio landlords. And also, if you're an individual landlord with one property or two properties, most likely one of them is your former home. So it's maybe got a lot more sentimental value. So if a tenant unknowingly, maybe they spilt wine on the carpet or they did something like that, it's more likely for them to get, to be honest, pissed off because of it. Whereas a portfolio landlord would kind of take it on the chin and be like, oh yeah, that's just another thing that, happens in property. Whereas you get different responses from different landlords. So
I guess you just got to be a bit empathetic, I guess, in certain situations to just understand where they're coming from as well. But yeah, I guess in any situation with any landlord, you have to adapt to them. So I guess in some ways it's a bit of a redundant question, but I thought it was interesting to ask nonetheless.
Not at all. Yeah, no, I think it's a good question.
And obviously you just mentioned spilling red wine on the carpet, but I know that you've got a particular case study that you mentioned to me before where it really does sort of demonstrate where a property manager can come in and kind of really support a landlord through certain situations that you wouldn't necessarily expect to come up against. I think the case study that I'm talking about.
So we had I was so interested to go around this property because it's just so different. But we had one property where a landlord approached us through a referral, saying he'd like us to come and help him rent out his property. He had a recent issue where the property had been, he found out police had raided it and it was a weed farm. So that obviously was a bit of a surprise to him. But yeah, we assessed, we went in there and you could see like the door was, broken in. All the windows are boarded up. There was like fake kind of partition walls. They put like kind of like hooks and stuff to hang up the lighting and the weed plants and stuff. All the weed had actually been taken away by that point, but still you can still see what was going on there. And then you also find like ventilation. So they'll make holes in the wall to put big kind of tubing ventilation to obviously keep fresh air going because they have all the windows generally closed and blacked out. Just maybe, I guess, to keep consistency of temperature and all that. I'm not an expert in this field. Yeah, I imagine that's what they were doing. Electrics had been jumped, of course, because you imagine the electrical cost for a weed farm is quite high. So they had managed to reroute before it hits the meter. So they jumped that. So it's very unsafe, the electrics, with kind of ad hoc fuse boxes made everywhere. So yeah, I guess we that was a very interesting one to find and to go around. And obviously just feel terrible for the landlord who, oddly enough, had a managing agent and it still happened. So there's some agents out there that's why you have to do your due diligence, as we talked about earlier. So yeah, that was an interesting one. So we just went in there, assessed it, and the first thing was just making it safe in terms of electricals because we're going to have trades and stuff coming in to sort this property out. So yeah, first made it electrically safe. Police had finished they said that we can kind of go in and take it on from there. And this landlord was an international landlord. So I guess maybe he somewhat had been taken advantage in that element because he didn't visit the property or the country within years or so. So yeah, pretty much we kind of had to gut the property out, kind of like a standard refurb, but obviously we found more damage to like window frames because they had drilled into the window frames, set up new ventilation. Luckily, there wasn't a sprinkler system. Some weed farms have a sprinkler system, so you could find for months on end, your property could be soaking up water from a sprinkler system. We found one landlord, I think he had to like pay like £20,000 to sort out his one. So it can be, if you've got a weed farm, then that's, and it's got a sprinkler system that's not, looked after, I guess, then you can have issues there. But yeah, we had to kind of gut it out. Obviously, we just did a lot of video calls with the client, showing him what it is before, giving him a kind of an idea of where we want to get to in terms of getting this back into a habitable property, thinking about, okay, how are we going to, as well as decorate it, okay, what about the smell of weed in the property, getting carpets either cleaned or just removing them altogether, which I think we ended up doing anyway. And yeah, just talking through the client with a lot of video calls, I think, because it was hard to imagine all the bits that come up in a weed farm, like the electrical issues, the windows being kind of busted because of they were making fake partition walls everywhere. Yeah, it was very to me it was very fascinating, but obviously terrible for the landlord. But it was very interesting experience, and I think just for landlords, maybe listen to this, and agents, just make sure to inspect your properties quite often, do inspections, and particularly if a tenant like pays you rent in advance for a long period, with a higher rent than they would normally do, then maybe ask some questions as well.
No, you're right. It does definitely show the importance of doing your due diligence and making sure that, as you say, that you do sort of follow things by the book. And it must have been quite an interesting one to sort of putting your property management skills to the test to rectify everything afterwards. But it turned out to be successful. I know that you re-rented the property and so on, and it all went well.
Yeah, still renting it, I think 4 or 5, some years down the line, and also now have other properties of his that we manage as well. So he's very happy landlord. Thank God.
I guess I actually just with the fact that you say that they are staying in the property for a few years down the line. I mean, aside from the aspects that we've already touched on, I mean, what would you say is the key to helping keep your tenants in a property for that long period of time? Because obviously you can dress up the property initially when they move in and help them see that lifestyle and things, but that doesn't necessarily lead to them staying for a long period of time. Sure. So what do you do to help make sure that your landlords can keep them?
Well, I guess if we're kind of like two sides of the coin, one is if we talk about HMOs particularly, it's going to come down to generally like the maintenance and cleanliness, but primarily is actually the other people you put in the house. Because all you need is one bad egg, and then pretty much you can get the whole house abandoning ship, as it were. So really thinking about, okay, does this person going to gel well with the other people in the house? If it's like a professional HMO where you actually do want them to kind of get along. For some HMOs, you might be more than happy. They kind of stick to their room, and that's the kind of deal that they get, and they're happy to do that. But I think in London and stuff, generally we have more of the kind of professional HMO where you do want them to gel well. Yeah. And then it all just comes down to matching the right tenants, the right people in the house. So just trying to, if you find anyone, okay, you know what, although they might be good on paper, they're not going to gel well. They're like got very different professional working hours. So, they're going to annoy everyone when they're waking up in the midnight and, about to go to work or something like that. Just think about, okay, if I've got other options, let's just be a bit wise about it. And in terms of, first of all, like HMOs, but for single lets, I guess the key for keeping tenants long term is, I think, all about fast communication with them with like repairs and upkeep of the property. We repair stuff generally very quickly, very proactive. And luckily we have this kind of maintenance cap I mentioned, which allows us to act on things really quickly without even having to ask the landlord, which they want to happen anyway. They want to keep a happy tenant, and they also want to not be bothered where possible. Yeah, I think just being communicative is that sort of correct word, and just being really responsive to maintenance issues, because that really annoys tenants in this day and age. Everyone's so busy. The last thing they need is to go home and think, oh, they've got an issue around the place. So yeah, I think just being really responsive is so key.
It seems that you do take quite a holistic view of that customer service, just making sure that everybody gets the right customer service for them, whether it is your tenant or your landlord. I know that recently, actually, we had a webinar. It was with John Paul from Castle Dean Group. He taught through retaining agency staff and building up company culture to do so. But I suspect that, like agency culture, it probably feeds into a bit how landlords feel that they're going to be treated as well. I mean, how important is agency culture to your landlords? Is it something that they buy into your brand, into you as people, your agency?
Yeah, I think it's massive for an agency, or for any agency. When you think about your landlords or even your tenants, they're not just going to talk to you. They're going to talk to everyone. At some point, they're going to talk to various people within your company, in your agency. So having like someone who doesn't match that sort of culture and about going above and beyond for their clients, it's just going to impact negatively. I guess obviously it comes from your directors, the managers. What is the culture? They have to actually set a clear kind of culture, what they want to achieve when they are communicating to landlords, and how they go about doing their job. And then I think you just have to be very disciplined with the whole. I think there's a saying: hire slow, fire fast. If you think. Just take your time in vetting and doing interviews and stuff with the team members you are looking to take on, to make sure, okay, this person is really going to hit the mark with our team. They're going to gel well with everyone. And if you find you do hire someone who isn't a right fit, don't keep them on the books and keep on going and then thinking, okay, maybe it's going to be okay. Maybe my culture would fill into them a bit more down the line. It's just best to kind of cut where you can, cut your losses and think, okay, you know what, it's not working, but thank you very much. And then that culture, because you don't want that culture being ruined at all, because that is what the landlords buy into. So yeah, I think it's just very important to really have a clear setting a really clear culture, and then ensuring you've got the right team members to really live to it as well.
And to round off our conversation, I guess that, what most of what we've talked about at the beginning, at least, was, getting landlords on initially as on the property management side of things. What about those stragglers, the landlords that may be on a let-only service? I mean, how do you go about having conversations with them to actually get them to move to a property management service? What really do they look for, and what do they value in those conversations?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting one, because we've got some landlords we do let only, and if they ask us for we call it like pseudo management, because they're asking questions, like kind of like management questions, like how can I do this, how can I do that, and you're like, oh, you're not a management client, but I'll help you out anyway, because you want to help, be helpful. So it's a bit I think that's where you get the problem, is when they're kind of getting the best of both. You have to be disciplined and say, you know what, obviously we're happy to help where we can. Here's what you can get for, a management service. These are all the benefits you get. And I think you just have to kind of, really reel it off to them, make them aware, because they might not have it obviously front of mind. So you just have to think, okay, these are all the benefits you can get with being managed. We know you're busy, etc. This is how we can help. And just, especially when you have the landlords calling you for some assistance, I think you just have to at some point weave it in there and say, obviously I would love to help further, but we have, I have to prioritize my management clients. But if there's something you're interested in, and then you try and weave in how they become a management client as well, and give them a special discount as well.
Yeah, that seems a nice way to get them on board. But it's good, I guess, if they start asking questions, it's quite a clear indication that you might be able to sort of suggest the next level for them if they're starting to ask that type of question. So
yeah, usually you're on good terms anyway with them. So I think that they generally don't mind, being I imagine they expect these conversations at some point. But we've converted landlords to management, and just by illustrating the extra benefits they get of it, particularly when they get busy. That's a really key factor, because everyone wants time.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Well, do you think, before I bring our conversation to a close, do you think that we've missed off any particular tips or advice that you think that you'd like to share on how to get property management right? I realise that we've touched on a variety of topics and a variety of steps in the process, but is there anything that you think that we've missed, or any key element that you'd like to share?
No, I think it's really clear communication to particularly if you talk about landlords. Really clear communication to them, and trying to get them also the best price in terms of trades. I think that's quite a key one, because whenever they look at their monthly statement, they have to know that you are doing the best by them, because we have trades quote stuff and we could accept the quote without even asking the landlord, but then we go back and say, no, we need it cheaper, or we need it, obviously you still need the same standard quality of work, but I think it really going above and beyond in the background for your landlord just sets a good tonality for not only your internal, how you work internally from, as demonstrating as the leader of your team, for example, but also it will come through to the costs and stuff that get incurred by the landlord. And as a culture overall, it will filter through as well. I was just thinking about, would you accept this cost, or would you do this way personally? We always like to put ourselves personally, especially when it comes to viewings and that kind of stuff as well. Again, we happily reject people we just I'll say just don't like, but you can just tell that, this ain't the right person, and that's because you want years worth of hopefully no tenants changing in the property, no hassle. So I think really trust your gut, and a lot of agents really think about this commission first, and then it's not really could be not my problem later on. It could be another team member, or even just the landlord who's on less only. That is I think a really bad way of looking at it. I think you have to really only do it as if you would do it for yourself. It takes more effort, it takes more work, but your landlords would love you for it, and we've never had a landlord leave us for poor service, and so we hope to keep that track record going as well.
I think that's a great positive note to end our conversation on. So thanks ever so much, Abs, for joining. I think it has been really interesting. I think it's really highlighted the importance of referencing and how much that filters into later stages down the road. And obviously making sure that you do your due diligence, continue to have those conversations and ensure that you're offering that great service that you appear to be doing. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for having me.